For 40 days, the lights dimmed across federal agencies, paychecks froze, and America's longest government shutdown tested the endurance of its institutions and citizens alike. And then, in a 60-40 Senate vote late Monday night, a bipartisan coalition broke through the paralysis, sending a stopgap funding bill to the House and seen by many as a fragile lifeline for federal operations and by others as a political compromise that exposes the deeper fractures within both major parties. The measure brings back life into the federal workforce, extending government operations through January the 30th, while leaving deeper fractures unresolved. And from the future of healthcare subsidies to the politics of debt. And as the bill moves to the Republican-controlled House and awaits President Trump's signature, questions linger. Is this vote a sign of restored stability or merely just another pause before the next political storm? And I'm Salma El-Fiki, and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
During the government shutdown, President Trump has employed an unrestrained approach, leveraging the crisis for political and strategic gains. According to the New York Times, President Trump viewed the shutdown as a tool to assert power and pressure political adversaries, disregarding conventional limits or repercussions. His actions included threats and bold moves on funding priorities, often pushing boundaries to enforce his agenda. This shutdown period highlighted Trump's willingness to exploit government operations and public hardship to fulfill his objectives, showing no hesitation in using government leverage to manipulate policy outcomes. His tactic underscored a broader pattern of treating governance as a transactional and combative arena where no option or tactic was off limits for achieving political dominance. And the U.S. House of Representatives is set to vote on a bill aimed at ending the longest government shutdown in history. And The Guardian stated that the Senate passed the funding package in a 60-40 vote, advancing the bill to the House for final approval. And this legislation would fund the government through January the 30th, 2026, and includes full-year funding for certain agencies. After more than 50 days pause, the House is expected to reconvene and vote as early as today afternoon, with multiple votes anticipated. House Republicans expressed confidence the bill will pass and the shutdown would end upon President Trump's signature. And the shutdown severely impacted government operations, and this vote represents a critical step towards reopening the government and restoring normal functions.
The U.S. Senate this week broke a protracted impasse, approving late Monday night by a 60-40 margin a funding package that effectively ends the longest government shutdown in American history. The shutdown had shuttered key agency operations since October 1st, halted food assistance for millions, left hundreds of thousands of federal employees unpaid, and caused major disruptions in air travel. The deal funds most federal agencies through January 30th, ensures back pay for federal workers, and halts planned mass layoffs tied to the Trump administration's downsizing agenda. However, it stops short of addressing the looming health insurance battle. Subsidies under the Affordable Care Act's tax credits remain unresolved, with only a pledge to revisit them in December and no guarantee of continuation. Politically, the vote shone a spotlight on intra-party fractures. 8 Senate Democrats broke ranks to join Republicans, igniting anger among the party's progressive base and raising questions about leadership's capacity to bargain. On the GOP side, hardliners hailed the outcome as a major victory, a deal that reopens the government yet avoids an immediate commitment to healthcare reforms. We are going to reopen government.
As we said from the beginning, the people's government cannot be held hostage to further anyone's political agenda. That was never right.
As the bill now moves to the House of Representatives for final approval and eventual signature by President Donald Trump, the clock begins ticking anew. January 30th stands as the next deadline, and without a broader agreement, another shutdown looms.
And to unpack the ramifications of the Senate's action, its political meaning, economic cost, and strategic implications, we're joined here today by Mr. Dennis Jaff, the strategic affairs expert from Washington, and Mr. Nauman Aboissa, the political analyst on the U.S. affairs from Iowa. And together they help us decode what this fragile deal reveals about America's divided governance and whether it truly signals a return to normalcy. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me here today at Think Tank. And I will start with Mr. Dennis. Let's begin with the vote itself, sir. How significant is the 60-40 outcome after weeks of gridlock?
Marhaba, Salma, good to be with you and to talk about these issues for your audience. It's very clear that the 60-40 vote in the United States Senate in favor of ending the federal government shutdown is a very, very significant step forward for President Trump to reopen the government. Democrats are unhappy with those in the Democratic caucus in the Senate who supported the tentative agreement because Democrats believe, and it is widely believed, that Democrats really were able to gain political capital by arguing something that had compelling morality, which was that the Republicans were wrong to go ahead with a budget that is basically short-changing and giving very, very unfair conditions on a day-to-day basis to families on their health care in the United States. Democrats believe that it's important that if they're going to sign on to a budget, which is the document that says this is what our values are as a country, that they need to have confidence in that value statement in that budget. They did not. And so that when those who voted in favor of ending the federal government shutdown, the Democrats believed that they were compromising the leverage that they did have to make impact and influence government policy.
Mr. Nauman, what do you think were the key factors that maybe drove the bipartisan support for this spending package?
Yes, finally, we have an agreement in the Senate to move this bill forward after the Democrats recognize that the Republicans are stuck with their positions and they don't care about the American people. And they made their point, the Democrats made their point that healthcare is a human right for the American people, and they will fight for healthcare for all people in the U.S. And that drove about 8 Democrats to vote for this bill to allow the 60 vote needed for the progression of this bill to go to the House of Representatives and then to the desk of the President of the United States. And the House, it seems like, got their act together, and they are going to be meeting this afternoon, and they are rounding all the Congress representatives from around the country, since the Congress have not sat in session since September 19th, and some of the airplanes are not flying on times, so they are trying to take cars, motorcycles, whatever they can to get back to the Capitol this afternoon to vote on this bill, to approve it, and then send it to the President's desks. And that is a major change for the American people. They are worried, they are concerned. Lots of services are interrupted and disrupted, and also many government employees, federal government employees, are working or not working. If they are working, they might not be getting their paycheck, and that is a disruption to the American economy and for the big economy and the biggest government in the world. I'm glad things are going to be back on the right track, but we are not there yet.
Yeah. Mr. Dennis, we have 8 Democratic senators. They joined with the Republicans to reach a deal to reopen the government without extending the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which was the very demand that had prompted the shutdown. What political calculations led some Democrats to cross this aisle?
Right. Well, so the subsidies are a payment by the federal government to families to reduce the price of the monthly premiums of health insurance. And they were enacted during the pandemic. There was an expiration date, which is current right now, started happening weeks ago. And that's why it has come due. And the Democrats, plus one independent senator who caucuses with the Democrats, voted to end the government shutdown or to move toward taking that step because they felt that people were hurting too much as a result of the cuts, as a result of the interruption in services. For example, there is food financial assistance for families all across this country that was stopped as a result of the federal government shutdown. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees throughout the entire country who are not earning a paycheck, many of whom are actually forced to work even while not collecting a paycheck.
Mr. Nauman, what role do you expect Speaker Mike Johnson to play as the bill moves to the House?
Well, Speaker Johnson has been working to round up the House, and that is the biggest job for him, to get the House back in session. And that is, I guess, his role to get the 50% approval, which we think and he thinks that he will get that approval this afternoon. It's still morning here in the U.S., and we are still a few hours away from the afternoon. And he will be rounding the vote and also confirming a new Congress person to the Congress, and that will give him enough votes to get the 50% needed to approve the Senate version of this bill to move ahead and allow the government to get back in session. To get the services back to the American people, even though the Supreme Court has ruled that the United States president can hold money for food, basically for the SNAP program, which helps the poor people in the United States. And that is the president's intention, is to play his cards, to hold the benefits to the people as he pleases, to show that he is powerful, that he is king. And that is what we are seeing today, that the president is trying to show off that he is the final commander in control of both White House and Congress, and he can do what he pleases, and the American people at his mercy.
Mr. Dennis, many call this a temporary fix. In your view, what do you think? Is it genuinely restoring institutional stability or just merely postponing a crisis?
Oh, it's definitely the latter. It's a very important question. The need to extend the federal government operating will happen once again not long from now, and we'll face a similar situation. You know, the reason that this is so significant for the Republican Party is that on November 5th, just last week, the Republican Party suffered a terrible, terrible defeat in state after state, town after town, all across this country, to a degree that was not at all expected. It was a repudiation of the Trump administration. It was somewhat of a Democratic wave. And what is felt is that the Republicans are governing crisis to crisis to crisis. You can make the right decision in a crisis, but you are forced to make that decision that is not as a result of careful planning. And that's not the way to run a government. People have lost confidence in the Republican Party controlling the House of Representatives, the United States Senate, the White House, and even essentially the U.S. Supreme Court. The stoppage of payment in financial aid for food, the interruption of people's salaries to be able to afford day-to-day expenses. You have air traffic controllers who are not able to report to work because they had to get to work, they had to pay for gas, they had to pay for childcare, and they were not collecting a salary. So the crisis had threats to our national security. It had threats to the aviation system and the airline industry, had threats to people's daily livelihood, as well as to the safety of food across this country. Really, in multiple hundreds of aspects of daily life in the United States were at risk because the Republican Party thinks that they can run roughshod over the public in this country with respect to their priorities, favoring the wealthy and basically sticking it to the middle class.
Mr. Noman, do you think the internal divisions within both parties, especially the Democratic rift over health care, might undermine the passage in the House? What do you think?
At this point here, the House is set to approve this bill. They believe that they have the 50% vote, but however, I guess the future holds a different perspective. The Democrats know that there is enough money in the United States government. Republicans don't mind approving $1 trillion for the Defense Department. For what they call it now, the War Department, and expenditure, it's been again up from 700 billion to 800 billion, and now to $1 trillion in the United States, and they are having a hard time subsidizing the healthcare for the poor, the food for the poor within a few $1 billion. So it's okay to approve $1,000 billion for the Defense Department, and then they are having problems approving a few $1 billion, dozen maybe or so to the SNAP program and to the healthcare system in the United States. So those priorities are going to continue. The Democrats are going to continue harping on those issues because the American people are paying for those healthcare. People's premiums are going to more than double paying for the healthcare system. It used to be $5,000 a year. Now it's going to go up to $10,000 or $12,000 a year. And some people don't have that kind of money. And that is what Democrats are trying to fight for, those people who can't afford healthcare. And then they are going to be overwhelming the emergency services in the United States. Instead of going to their regular appointment at the hospital, they'll be going to the emergency room, and that will disrupt the whole system. So the Democrats know that there is an election coming up in 2 years, and they are going to work toward helping the American people. And that's what the president said, that he wants to help lower prices, but he is increasing prices by more than double for healthcare, and that is a huge burden on many Americans.
And now we move to a live broadcast from Ankara, where the Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati and his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan are holding a press conference. Let's see.
Made such a military steps in the military exchange between the countries that included joint maneuvering and exchange visits. We are targeting to develop the military dialogue between the two sides. So we have a very strong to boost the military cooperation between the two countries through cooperation between the governmental enterprises and government. Will see that such a cooperation will be strengthened in the future. We've signed with my dear colleagues upon the end of such a meeting through minutes of the meetings through which we've achieved the roadmap. We are going to continue to communicate with Egypt with respect to the regional issues, and we've already tackled the conditions in Gaza. Hamas showed its desire and will in order to take positive steps to secure the ceasefire, and we also should be implied to Israel. We call it upon to lift all the obstacles that hinder the flow of the humanitarian aids in order for Egypt to flow such an humanitarian aid without any obstructions. We thank Egypt for delivering such a humanitarian aid through Gaza. Today, load trucks of 1,200 of humanitarian aid moved into the Al Arish port. We are going to exert all potentials in order to provide all the available opportunities of sheltering. Soon we'll witness the reconstruction conference to take place in Cairo, through which will support the required support with respect to the Gaza governments and other issues. All this will be working in order to have an essence of a resolution by the United Nations. There is a dire need to clarify the details with respect to the instability force to govern Gaza. Also, political and legal framework should be set out clearly. We, along with the relevant parts, along with Egypt, will continue to hold meetings with each other. It is a must for the United or the international community to remember that the Palestinian governance should be in the hands of the Palestinian Authority. This is our stance, and if we do so, other issues should be solved. While we discuss such matters, we could not able to manage to talk about the conditions in Libya. We also have a very much concern to have a stability in Libya, and will take all the necessary steps to be made by the Libyan leaderships and to be monitored by the United Nations. With respect to the Middle East, we wish to have a vision of such a region to be stabilized. All the relevant parties should have a full respect, and we have a goodwill of such a context. We've talked of my colleague upon the conditions in Sudan. Our stance in Sudan is similar of Egypt and Laos. Through continued clashes in Sudan that would cause more concern for us. Such clashes should be halted. Such strikes taking place against civilians in Sudan, we should work altogether to preserve the unity and the stability of Sudan. I've already talked with my dear colleague concerning the deterioration conditions in Syria, and we think that Mr. al-Shar's visit to Washington constitute a breakthrough. We are very much concerned that Syria has already joined the international alliance or coalition to confront ISIS. We are going to seize all the opportunities for Syria to move forward. We wish to see a free terrorism, Syria, and an integrity of its territories. Turkish and Egypt pursues and endeavors are going to continue to serve security and peace in the region. With this context, we'll see a joint cooperation is generating tangible results. I thank my dear friend, Mr. Badr Abdelati. I thank the relentless efforts exerted by Egypt, and I give the floor to him. Of Allah the most merciful and most compassionate, I thank very much my dear brothers, His Excellency Mr. Hakan Fidan, the Foreign Minister of Turkey. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like in the outset to convene to the Turkish and people and leadership my dearest condolences from the Egyptian government and Egyptian people upon being deceased according to the aircraft crash that took place yesterday, and we pray to the Almighty God to have them fully blessed and send their families to the condolences. In the outset, I wish to thank and appreciate my dear friend, Mr. Hakan Fidan, for the warm reception, and I would like to express my pleasure to visit Turkey for the second time and meeting with His Excellency Mr. President Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, through which we've discussed all of the international, regional issues of joint concern, as well as holding the meeting of the joint planning in its first meeting targeting to elevate the bilateral ties to broaden horizons. It is a great pleasure that's my visit to Ankara to go inside with the celebration of the two friendly countries of the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relations between the two countries that we have since history joint work to establish the principles of peace and stability. I congratulated my brother for Mr. Hadan, and we intend to grant the Turkish government a replication of scriptures of the first king, the third Hatib, to be in place in the very prominent area in Ankara as an embodiment of the most prominent relations between the friendly two countries. There's no doubt such a deepest history of the ties between the two countries to push the bilateral ties due to the importance paid by the leadership of the two countries. The Joint Strategic Council was established, presided by His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Mr. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and its first round was held in the 4th of September in Ankara by the presence of the two presidents. We look forward to convene the second edition of the high-level elevated strategic council by the presence of His Excellency Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And we've held a very positive meeting through the proceeding of the first meeting of the joint planning group by the participation of senior relevant authorities between the two countries who've expressed through which the mutual trust of exchanging such a collaboration during the upcoming period throughout all the relevant authorities of the two countries. We've also discussed the significance of continuing the joint work to implement the directives of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to lift up all the trade exchange to $15 billion, in addition to foster a very relevant environment of investment and to work upon to bolster the Turkish investment in Egypt, as we are very pleased of the current level of the Turkish investment, yet we still look forward to bolster such a level in different levels such as energy and the maritime shipment and the linkage of the Turkish-Egyptian port, as well as supporting all types of joint cooperations. Ladies and gentlemen, who've addressed through our talks the latest development with respect to the Palestinian cause, either in the Gaza Strip or in the West Bank, following the successful efforts of the relevant parties in reaching an agreement in Sharm el-Sheikh in halting the hostilities in Gaza, as we've agreed upon in the significance of the joint work in order to bolster such an agreement and to secure a ceasefire and to work to move forward to implement the second phase of the agreement, and not to give a chance of escalation once again, and reiterated the Egyptian-Turkish vision on the necessity of implementing the two-state solution and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the line of the force of Jinn and its Eastern Jerusalem as its capital according to the international conventions. And also we've tackled the negotiation taking place in New York upon the U.S. project exerted effort to formulate such a resolution according to the international reference through which to clarify and affirm and laying down and specific terms of the entities to be established, either with respect to the Stability International Force and other forces, and I've already invited my brother, Mr. Fidan, to join an international convention of the early reconstruction to be hosted by Cairo within the upcoming weeks to mobilize the efforts, international funding, to escalate to execute the project regarding the early reconstruction in light of the great devastation in this enclave, and on the importance of the preservation for keeping the Palestinian people on the land and their right to rebuild the infrastructure that was devastated, as we affirmed the full rejection of all policies that targeting to impose the status quo and the full rejection of all the annexation activities and to horrify civilians in the West Bank, who also reaffirmed the categorical rejection of any harming the Palestinian rights and affirming to reject all the unilateral practices and the violation of the historical and legal violation to the occupied Jerusalem. We've also discussed with Mr. Minister Fidan the latest development in Syria, and with this context, we fully support the integrity and the unity of Syria, and we look forward to have Syria within a very effective role in the framework of the Islamic Arab nations and within the international community that will be implemented effectively through the comprehensive political process, in addition to confront the terrorism in order to fulfill the aspiration of the Syrian people. We've also discussed upon achieving peace and security in Libya by supporting all efforts made by the national Libyan institutions, and to look forward to escalate to put an end of the current divisions and to convene the parliamentary and presidential elections and to guarantee the rejecting all the mercenaries, and also in Libya. And we also talked on the issue. So in Sudan, as we've agreed upon on the necessity of the ceasefire and the great importance to maintain the unity of Sudan, and the integrity of its territories, and reject all attempts to divide Sudan, and with giving full support to regain peace and stability. And I've already informed Mr. Minister Khan to continue Egyptian efforts, particularly my visit date into Port Sudan, honored to meet with President Burhan, as we've agreed to an immediate ceasefire, launched the comprehensive political process, particularly in the light of the deterioration of the humanitarian conditions, along with the conditions in the African Horn and the Red Sea, and tackled the issues on the international level, as the international arena witnessing an unprecedented challenges, including the Ukrainian crisis and its repercussions on the energy security. And we've agreed upon in reaching a political settlement. Our talks reflect in a very joint agreement, and we've agreed upon to continue bolstering our joint work throughout different issues. And I conveyed the greetings of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to Mr. President Erdogan, along with an invitation to join the meeting of the strategic council between the two countries. To conclude, I thank Mr. Minister Khidan by firming to continue the joint coordination to push the bilateral relations and achieving a settlement and de-escalate the conflicts faced by the regional arenas and the international arena. And thank you very much. The United States, through your talk, you've tackled the conditions in the northern of Syria. What are the development you are expecting with this context? Particularly, some media personnel have talked previously on such a meeting in the White House, describing them that are positive, along with Mr. al-Shara's meeting with Mr. Trump. Did you have any chance to join to such a meeting? And through such a meeting, we've expressed the Turkish vision of along with the United States and Syria. How could you solve out such problems? How for us to achieve all these issues? They are very important issues. President Trump shows a very much concerned, describing the meeting as a very positive step, particularly in light of the sincere steps as the international community is working to have a successful Syrian administration, and to work that such an administration would not impose any threat to any neighboring countries, along with the cooperation with other countries. I've already expressed the visions of the Turkish president to Mr. Trump. Along with the following meeting that took place, we've said that we've met with his the deputy president, such as Vance, along with Mr. Rubio. And if we wish to brief the meetings, we've already addressed the Syrian issues with the full details in another trilateral meeting that included the three foreign ministers, followed by the meeting by Trump and al-Shara, that followed by a very in-depth and detailed meeting with respect to the issue with the security issue between Israel and Syria. We've agreed upon to have a very determination to the borders between the two countries, and we've also addressed the issue of Druze, the north issue, and we think that they are trying to make a very constructive role in order to reach a very stable Syria. We are awaiting on a very potential resolution to be issued by the Security Council concerning the establishment of the anticipated forces to be formed. Such an international meeting with Mr. Woodcock, through which we've tackled the issue in Ukraine and how possible for Ukraine and Turkey to play in a very pivotal role with this context, and also to have another meeting with Syria in order to have a settlement of its issues. And we've also discussed the matters in the issue of the ceasefire agreement in Gaza. We had discussions with relevant issues. It was a very fruitful half day in the United States with all parties, through which we explored all the visions that concern Turkey and the United States. My questions for you, both foreign ministers, with respect to the securing the ceasefire agreement. What about the latest development along with the draft to be presented before the UN Security Council? What are the logistic guarantees with this regard, and other steps should be taken by Egypt and Turkey with this regard? Thank you very much. Egypt and Turkey participated in the meeting that took place in New York with President Trump, along with Islamic and Arab 8 countries. These countries, along with Egypt and Turkey, support Trump's plan to achieve peace in the region and ending the war on Gaza. Thanks to President Trump's effort, we've reached a ceasefire meeting, and now we hope to work on securing such an agreement, and we've reached such a meeting with a joint supported by Egypt, Turkey, and the United States, along with Turkey. Without all these countries, wouldn't have reached such a breakthrough. Now we should work on to secure such an agreement. We should focus also in securing the flow of great quantities of the humanitarian aid, and to work on the withdrawal of the Israeli occupation forces from the enclave, and followed by the execution of the second phase of President Trump's plan. there is a consensus between Egypt and Turkey, along with the Arab Islamic countries with this regard. Now we are focusing in New York on the new proposal presented by the United States, through which we discuss the articles of such proposals that will be very significant, that should be very carefully and accurately be formulated in order to determine the governance of the anticipated forces established, in order not to have a very reliable resolution to be implemented on the ground. We are continue to communicate with our friends in Turkey and the United States, including the relevant countries such as China, European countries, all talking about the formulation of the anticipated proposal, and we hope to have a consensus to be issued very soon in order to deploy the international forces and their main mission to monitor the ceasefire agreement execution in order to affirm the commitment of both parties, which is very significant, wouldn't be achieved without the presence of the international forces, along with very clarified and determined competences and authorities in order to enable to deploy the forces. Dialogue will be continue with our friends in the United States. As I mentioned, we hope in reaching a very quick agreement of the framework of such a proposal. And thank you. With respect to the humanitarian issues, as you all know, that the Egyptian Red Crescent, along with the NGOs in the region, they are very important in securing the flow of such an humanitarian aid. Turkey is paying a very much concern with this regard, as we've used to with our cooperation with Egypt, and have already tackled with my friends in order to transform such a cooperation to be in a very institutional framework, and to also discuss another issue which is working on to have a very permanent ceasefire. How would we guarantee such a step, along with the communication group to be established, as we long worked on such a mission without any obstruction, and how would for the UN to join such a cooperation with this context, along with the cooperation with the United States, how do you work in supporting such effort? Also, through the Washington meeting that was a very pivotal turning point, such as Egypt made several meetings with the American parties in order to secure a very permanent stability, not only in Palestine but in the whole region. And there was also a discussion regarding several issues through which, in order to work on and executing the two-state solutions, that would require a different trajectory of rhetorics. Along with the cooperation with the Islamic countries Council, and I cannot count all these results, but we've been always cooperated as brothers, as we were in belief that we are standing to by the just and the right. And if we continue with this regard, we won't have any hinders. We'll continue to cooperate, and we understand that such problems and issues will work on to have a settlement of such escalated problems. So both together we are going to confront through a very professional and joint coordination and collaboration presided by the two presidents of the two countries. As our president expressed his desire to execute such effort with yesterday's meeting, as well as today's meeting, we've witnessed in a very continued discussions in other issues such as energy and trade in order to fulfill the aspirations of our two people. So once again, I thank your presence. Another question from RT in Arabic. Thank you very much. My question directed to His Excellency Mr. Egyptian Foreign Minister. Your Excellency, Egypt exerted all the effort to secure a ceasefire agreement to end the genocide war in Gaza Strip. In the future, what is Egypt's priority specifically with this issue and its following steps in order to achieve such priorities? Thank you. Certainly, we are in Egypt, we are moving to the full support and coordination with our friend and brotherly countries, on top of which Turkey. Our priorities are very clear. The first priority, there is no doubt, to work upon to secure the ceasefire agreement and to stop the idea of resuming the war once again. That would seem impossible, and to have a permanent established ceasefire that should have a mechanism in order to implement such agreement. And the following step is deploying the international forces, but within the authorities and a very specific mandate to maintain peace and not to impose it, which is very important to highlight. The third priority, to continue to the flow of the maximum quantities of humanitarian aid into the clave. We should not say, or we should say, is just to have the Gaza Strip to fully observed by the humanitarian aids, and to have a very practical embodiment of the full linkage between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. These two territories are Palestinian, through which we should reaffirm the national unity between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And the following priority, we are approaching the winter season. We should escalate the efforts of reconstruction, entering the medical assistance. We have mostly 170 injured with a serious injury that they cannot be treated by the traditional means. They are required for a surgical intervention. And to enter the basic needs ranging of the clean water to the safe shelters in order to have a full protection for the people and civilians within the upcoming winter, and followed by political horizons through which the embodiment and the establishment of the Palestinian state as the only alternative in achieving a very sustainable and permanent peace and security in the region and country, including Israel.
And that was a live broadcast from Ankara, where the Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati and his counterpart, the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, they held a press conference. That was in the first meeting of the Turkey-Egypt Joint Planning Group. And both foreign ministers discussed a variety of topics. Foreign Minister of Turkey basically discussed that Egypt as being the largest trading partner of Ankara in Africa, and he also reiterated that Palestine should be in the hands of the Palestinians and that the Israelis to allow the humanitarian aid to all the Palestinians. And of course, energy and trade were also discussed, whereas the Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, he also discussed the ties between the two countries, Turkey and Cairo and Egypt, and to encourage the Turkish investment in Egypt. And also he discussed the latest developments and mentioned them of the Palestinian cause, and to enforce the ceasefire agreement, and Gaza's reconstruction was also discussed. And he also discussed the strengthening of the Egyptian-Turkish relations, rejecting the Palestinian displacement, and respecting Libya's sovereignty and Egypt's support for Sudan's stability. And the Ukrainian conflict was also discussed. And with that, I would like to also thank my two guests, Mr. Dennis Jaff and Mr. Nouman Abou Issa, who joined me today at Think Tank, for your valuable insights on this critical turning point in the U.S. governance, where politics and policy converge. And that was the end, and the temporary deal brings the relief, but the deeper challenges of the partisan gridlock and the structural reform remain. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. And thanks for watching, and do stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.